Q&A, but before we do, we're going to hear, speaking of risk assessment, we're going to hear a little bit from Neelam Vaidya, CEO of VeritasChem, about this VeritasChem chemical analyzer. Then we'll do Q&A. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat. And now, Neelam, over to you.
Today, I would like to describe our VeritasChem platform very quickly and also show you one example, a feature of the product chemical analyzer that the scientists use to find less toxic chemicals. So let me share my screen. I hope you can see the screen here. VeritasChem has built one of the most comprehensive toxicity database covering over 95 million chemicals. We have collected experimental data from most US and international government databases, research organizations, safety data sheets from reputed sources, and 136 different global regulatory lists. And we have been constantly updating this data and curating it using automated AI-based in-house tools. Where there are data gaps, we use industry standard prediction models to create in silico data. And soon we'll be publishing paper that describes the accuracy of our data. Chemical analyzer provides full toxicity analysis with 48 different physical and toxicological properties per chemical. And based on these properties, we provide scores that measure the chemical's environmental impact and potential acute and chronic health issues it can cause during the using of 56 different endpoints. One of the unique features it offers, it's critical for the drug discovery groups, is being able to generate in silico data on demand and in time. This allows the scientists to identify the high-risk drug targets even before the R&D work starts. Today, chemical analyzer is being used by different departments to understand toxicity of new and unknown molecules, find less toxic alternatives that can replace the toxic chemicals, resulting into a minimum toxic waste and greener sustainable product development. Understand the global regulatory implications and occupational hazards, and improve lab safety by isolating chemicals that pose significant health and safety risks. Here are all the physical and toxicological properties and scores that we provide through chemical analyzer. And we, in fact, will also provide you information about the industry use for the different chemicals by specific sectors. And here are the scores that are 56 different endpoints that are defined by the ANSI 355 standard to measure the toxicity. And we are using those endpoints, and we are now adding few extra ones as the time goes. Here are the sources of the properties, some of the properties that we have collected from these different sources, and also the prediction models that we are using. As you can see, we cover most of the sources that can offer experimental data as well as the regulatory information. Chemical analyzer can be used during process development to identify what options you may have in terms of using less toxic reagents during product development so that it can minimize the toxicity footprint. So if you want to replace a specific toxic chemical with better alternatives, or if you just want to find out what chemicals you can satisfy your reaction needs, simply provide the reaction requirements in terms of advanced search feature criteria, and the product will provide you with a list of alternatives along with their toxicity scores. You select the 3 or 4 best alternatives to consider, and then do a benchtop scale experiment to find out which works best for you. So let's take a simple reaction to make dimethyl isosorbide that is used in sunscreen lotions and other cosmetic products. Isosorbide is mixed with iodomethane. The problem is that iodomethane is volatile iron skin irritant, and it generates toxic hydrogen iodide as a byproduct. So using chemical analyzer, I can provide the reaction requirements, minimum boiling point 80 degrees centigrade, flash point 100 degrees centigrade to ensure non-volatile compound. Avoid the eye and skin irritation, and it must have the carbonyl, carbonyl alkyl carbon and carbonate to enable dimethylation reaction. So you can provide your search criteria this way using the advanced search feature, and you submit. And you get the list of chemicals along with the toxicity scores. So you will select the least toxic reagents from the list that are easily and cheaply available and see which one works for you. Thank you very much.
Here's one for Michael and then Craig. We'd love to hear from you what you see as the difference between green chemistry adoption and sustainability, and whether you think these two different goals will merge in the future. So starting with you, Michael Schultz.
Sure. So I guess I think of green chemistry as being related more to toxicology and health impacts, whereas sustainability is perhaps more related to carbon footprint. But I think these terms are becoming merged, and we're seeing a trend where green chemistry is being thought of as a way to help address the global warming challenges that we have.
Oh, great, thanks. And Craig, did you want to comment? What do you see as the differences between green chemistry adoption and sustainability, and are they merging in your view?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's a new framework called sustainable chemistry as well. So green chemistry is Paul Anastas and forget the other professor's name, developed it years ago, has 12 principles, largely focusing on the development of the chemical itself, trying to make a lower hazardous chemical, but also paying attention to resource usage. They call it atom economy, energy, water. So sustainability concepts are built into the green chemistry, developing new chemicals as well. Also things like economics and performance. So I mean, it's a very, very robust framework that needs to be followed. You pay attention to develop a new chemical. Sustainable chemistry is really interesting. It also follows all of the sort of the norms of sustainability, whether you're paying attention to climate, the carbon footprint, water, energy, socioeconomic aspects, child labor, all of the things that you'd want to pay attention to in sustainability. But it also embeds green chemistry. That's one of the embedded criteria. It should be developed through green chemistry. And then it does something rather interesting. It actually asks the question, do you really need to make this chemical? Can you solve the problem a different way? Or can you solve it with a different material instead of using that chemical? So you're actually looking at the product itself, not just the chemical, and then all of the life cycle considerations of making the product, making the chemical, and whether or not it's even needed in the first place. That's a bigger question. So they are very much related. They're interlocked, and green chemistry is one of the criteria within sustainable chemistry. It's actually embedded in the framework. So.
Well, thanks both of you. Here's another question for you, Craig. One of our attendees today wants to know, when you say your model at UL is 80% accurate, what does that actually mean?
So we test that two different ways. So we train the data on some of our chemicals in our database, not all of them. And you hold some out. We call that a holdout. We know what the chemicals hazard classifications are. We build the model, and then we compare the holdout chemicals, the predicted hazards, to their known hazards, and we're getting accuracies of 80%, in general. Okay. Then the other way we do it is we use all the data, and then we pull out 20%. And we do a cross validation. So we'll do that 5 or 10 times. Hold out 20%, train the model, randomly pull out another 20%, train the model again, the remaining 80%, and do the same thing, compare the accuracy. So it's cross validation and a holdout set. So the model's never, on both cases, the training data and the holdout data, or the cross-validation holdout data are not used to build the model with training models with. And that's how you get your performance criteria, your accuracies, and all the information I shared with you. So
good, thanks. And I believe, thank you for that. Riddhi on our team at VeritasChem is going to share the results of the risk assessment survey that many of you took. We'll share that on screen, and we'll also include an upcoming email. We'll go on for a little bit past the hour with a few more questions for those who are interested. And thank you everyone, especially our guests, for being here today. So here's a question for Michael. So can you talk about, you touched on this, but if you could talk a little bit more about what are the main issues that you and your customers come across most often? Is it in terms of customers' expectations versus what can actually be done, or urgency and commitment for green chemistry versus cost and difficulty? Well, what do you come across most often, Michael?
Yeah, I think that with any type of hard tech or chemical technology, the capital costs are significant, and so I think that there's a growing appreciation to the capital requirements needed to scale a new technology. I think that there is also a growing understanding of even things such as financing that first commercial plant is a challenge. But we're seeing more acceptance in the by customers and investors, and some creative ways to approach that. So I think that it's just an understanding of the time and cost needed to get some of these technologies to scale.
Okay, well, we really appreciate both of you and your time. And do we have any other questions? Neelam, do you want to take it away? You want to also unmute?
Well, actually, I had a question for Craig about some of the difficulties he has had in doing any validation for your AOP modeling, and because it's a new technology. Do you have any feedback on that?
yes, so especially in the early days, we wanted to make sure we were validating it correctly. And we created a model that was using multiple features off each chemical, not just the one endpoint and the structure. So for example, if a chemical was a skin sensitizer, we wanted to determine whether or not it was an irritant, there may be an association of skin sensitizers to irritants. So we're putting both features from a chemical into the model along with the structure. That led to the challenge of whether or not we were overfitting our data. By putting more features in, you can start to overfit. And so we had to sort out a way to make sure we were doing that validation correctly. So, and another way we solved this is UL has a group called the Model Trustworthy it's that verification. It's our modeling team at UL verifies all kinds of models, and we'll give a verification, it's not a certification. So I asked them to take a look at our model internally at UL, and they gave us a lot of feedback on making sure how we were testing correctly for the possibility of overfitting, and they called it leaking too. And so that was one of the big challenges. And since then, there have been many publications that have concluded that you can do that in a model. You can put multiple features in and rely upon, look for one feature that's missing. You want to predict it from one chemical. They may share a lot of the other features that the chemicals in the training set also have, but that improves the predictions. And we were able to demonstrate that by turning off each feature and determining what percent association or the increase in probability, what it was contributing to the probability predictions. And I think that's where we're going to go with all of this data, the ability to pull it all in. It's going to be very complicated. It's going to be challenging. As I mentioned, if you go to the regulatory environment, they're going to want to know, what is your algorithm? What are all these hidden layers in these neural networks? They can't be hidden. They have to be known. And so that's going to be a big challenge to the community. as we build these more complex models and we want to use for regulatory decisions, we're going to have to be able to explain everything, what the model was relying on, what features were being relied on to make those predictions. We need to get the mechanism, so to speak, behind the predictions. So that's still a challenge.
Yes, we are actually coming across some of these challenges also and getting ready to address those. So